Okay. Kum Lenen Ablak Gemara. This is the Gemara for Tainus Esther, Daf Tes Amid Aleph. And we're still discussing the Aleh, what the Aleh is all about. So we're saying if Aleh has nothing to do with the fact that your sister-in-law you're not allowed to marry, because we never would have thought that you're allowed to, because Anasei is not Deicha Loisish Bekaris and nor the Tzara as well. So what is Aleh coming to say? So we had Rebbe who said that we had a Rebbe who learned from a pasuk Lekacha Yidma that a Tzara is Aser only if there's a mitzvah Yibum, but if there's no mitzvah Yibum, then it's not Aser. So now we want to know what is, since the Rebbe learns that from Lekacha, not like the Rabbanan who learned that from the word V'aleh, what does the Rebbe do with the word V'aleh? The bottom of the page. But Rebbe, Hayaleh, over the Daf Chetzim base, very bottom of the page. We'll start with me. Rebbe, since he already learned from somewhere else regarding the tzara, regarding the woman herself, we don't need, because that says not the curse. It's only regarding the tzara. And according to Rebbe, the tzara, we know that is only usher when there's a mitzvah, when there's no mitzvah. For example, your son-in-law is married to your daughter and another woman. That woman, that tzara, is permitted, and he learned it out from the lakha and the yibma. Didn't have to say the extra hey. So what does he do with the la? Not like the Roman learn from Allah. But Rebbe, he needs to follow the Tanya, the following halacha, which has absolutely nothing to do with anything that we discussed till now. This has to do with the general rule that you bring a carbon chatas only on an avera that if you did it deliberately, you will get chorus, and if you did it inadvertently, you bring a carbon chatas. A carbon chatas you bring b'shegig. B'shegig can mean either you didn't know the halacha, or b'shegig can mean you didn't realize that this product in front of you was treif, so it was a shegig. And there are four different kinds of people we just learned in Parashat Vayikra, also in the Shlach. There are four different kinds of people that bring different kabbalas in their situations. So you learn Ein Chayav Bezdin when they make a mistake, an error in law, and everyone practices it purely based on the Bezdin's halacha. They realize then later made a mistake. Bezdin has to bring a bull on behalf of everyone. Ein Chayav Bezdin Ella Bezdin Chayav only on something Novash is Doiner Kodesh. Only on something if that particular Aveda had it done deliberately get karas. In fact, we'll learn Masechta Krisos there are 36 Avedas. It says in the Mishnah, the first Mishnah, that you have karas for. And if you did it by mistake, you get a chatas. That's number one. Case number two, V'chein HaMashiach, a Kohen HaMashiach. Kohen that was a non to the Kohen Gadol. He also, if he makes a shegig, now when we say a shegig by a Kohen Gadol, we mean a shegig in an error in law. If he makes an error in law, he brings this special carbon as well. Again, when we say error in law, only mazid karas shegig chatas. The same thing by Avodah Zarah. If the community, let's say, goes ahead and worships an Avodah Zarah based on an error in law, they have to bring a different carbon altogether. They bring two karbanos. They bring a bull for a carbon oil that gets fully burnt, and they bring a goat for a chatas. So we're going to find out how do we know all of these things. But tonight, we also learn kol mitzvah shebetoida. Any mitzvah in the Torah shechayav and aldain the kares or gechatas that yechay mezit kares and shegechatas. When we said by avodah zarah that you only bring a carbon if it's a amazing kares, because there are many activities for avodah zarah. There are four activities that regardless you're always chayav chata. These are the four prime activities, which are shechting, roast, and then burning it, and then libations, and then bowing yourself, and kissing and embracing and all that. That you don't get kares for. And when it says that you get that the shegig has to be chatas by avodah zarah, when isn't it chatas? For example, if you did not do any activity, whatever you did wasn't considered a ma'aseh. You said things or whatever, it wasn't a ma'aseh. Now we're continuing. But now we learn the Mishnah. Kol mitzvah shebatoida. Any mitzvah in the Torah shechayav and learn the kodesh. V'chayav liable for mezid kodesh. Yachid depends who did the aveda. Yachid, if you're an individual, maybe either you bring kizba, either you bring a oisida. You bring either a female. When it comes to a chatas, it's a female. Remember we learned an oil. We just read in the Torah of Vayikra. An oil is a zachar. A chatas is a female, either a sheep or a goat. If a nasi commits an aveda, by an individual aveda, maybe he brings seir. A nasi brings a goat. Mashiach who bezdin, if it's a kohen gadol and a bezdin, they have the same law. And they bring par, a bull. But if avodah is kachavim, if it happens to be avodah zarah, then it works differently. So normal avodah, we say each person has one din, a nasi has another din. Right, a person brings a female carbon, and you have a choice of a sheep or a goat. A nasi brings a male and only a goat. and a Mashiach and a Bezin, they both bring a bull. When it comes to Avodah Zarah, we split it differently, and that is, as long as you're an individual, I don't care which category you find yourself in, Yachid, Nasi, Mashiach, they all bring Me'ivin and Se'ira. They all bring a female goat for Avodah Zarah, if it's a mistake. However, Tzibur, if it's the entire community, and relying on a Bezin, Mevim, they bring par, bring two kabbalas. They bring a par, which is an oila, and a soira goat for a chatzah, male goat for a chatzah. So, how do you know this? So now this, we're going to come back to this Allah business. How do you know this? We learn, it says a pasuk, let's say, you became aware of the chatzas that you sinned, Oleha, right? It says here, Oleha. It's Rebbe says, so this is the Rebbe we asked before, what do you do with Allah? Rebbe says, Nemakan, here it says, Oleha. Here it says, if you sin Oleha on it. And it says, we have it later on, we had before, the Gemara, a woman and her sister. You should not take, because you're revealing her erva, Oleha. So malahalon, just like over there, what's the aveda? What's the punishment if you do marry? If you do the arayis, you get courage for that. And you get shaking chatas. Over here also we learn out that what do you call it? We learn out the first passage we're just talking about right now is talking about where the Bezdin made a mistake and the entire community followed it. You bring a what? You bring a part on which avedas, what kind of laws did the Bezdin make an error in? Davar shechayovin, I was doing the kaddish deliberately. You did it. You make chorus and valgogos chatas when shaking chatas. So Ashkan, all we know here is tzibur. So all we know is when it comes to the community who follow a bezin, it's only by these errors that involve chorus and chatas. Mashiach min, how do you know that a claim Mashiach is the same thing? That the only time he brings his carbon is if it was a mistake of chorus and chatas. It says by Mashiach, it says a pasuk, if the koyim Mashiach, we just learned this, the koyim Mashiach sinned la ashmas ha'am. We're comparing it to the sin of the people. So therefore, the Kohen Mashiach has the same din as the case of the Bezdin who made a mistake. Hare Mashiach tzibur. So Kohen Mashiach is just like a tzibur. Yochid v'nasi, and how do you know that a yochid? And how do you know a nasi also the shegig chatas and mezich kares? Asya, we learn now the word mitzvah. It says by a nasi, it says he sinned and he did one of these mitzvahs that he shouldn't have done. And then it says also mitzvah, and it says by an ordinary person. And again, we have the Vayikra. That it says there that for nefesh achas amoretz ba'asoisa achas mitzvah Hashem. So therefore, we compare them to each other. Okay, so therefore we know that they're all the same amazing chatas and shaygig. But what about the v'loi ba'avodas kachavim? And then we say. Avodah Zarah, we said it before, we said Avodah the same thing. When do we say that this din here that you're bringing off everybody made a mistake, you bring a par of the soyer? Only if it's a mistake, that if it involves chorus and chatas, and not, let's say, if you just embrace, if they paskin do not embrace Avodah Zarah, you wouldn't bring this par. How do we know that? By Avodah Zarah. When it comes to the community, we bring the two kabbalah, if you learn out, me'ene. It says in pasuk, what do you call it? It says, getting back to the before mitzvahs, and there's another pasuk mitzvahs which says, if kol adas Yisrael yishgu, if the entire community, and they did one of the mitzvahs of shalois sana. So therefore, we know that mitzvahs that involve the entire community, we already established that entire community is only amazing kar and shogeg chatas from the very first pasuk there. So therefore, Allah. So therefore, we know that individuals, whether it's a nasi or whether it's individual, it's always a shogeg chatas. Now we're talking about Avodah Zarah. It says, if it was concealed and they made a mistake, then they have to bring a par and a soy. And then it says, so therefore, because it says here, and then it says, the pasuk before, when talking about a general aveda, it says there, the entire das Yisrael made a mistake, and it was concealed me'ene hakol. So therefore, we know that we compare avodah zarah to regular mitzvah, which is kodesh and shagig. Fine. What about a yachid nasi mashiach? These three individuals that you said that they're different than the call, but they also only liable if it's a shagig and a mez and kodesh and a chatas, because it says in the pasuk ve'im, and if a pasuk or two later it says ve'im nefesh achas, and means it's continuing. Two psukim before it says if me'ene eda they forgot and so on and so forth, they didn't realize it and talked about Avodah Zarah. And then it says v'im nefesh achas technically, and if one person, and one person includes any one person, whether you're a nasi, a mashiach, or you're just a yachid, and it says and if, I mean you have the same rules. It says v'im nefesh achas echad yachid. I don't care how you are single, whether yachid, echad nasi, mashiach, the master all included. It's one person. And Vav Meisiv al Yiddish. Mav continues, and therefore the later pasuk we'll learn from the earlier. The Yilma Tachten Min Elyon. We're going to learn the later pasuk from the earlier pasuk. You know, the earlier pasuk we established that it's an avera that involves karas and chatas. Same thing. The later pasuk is an avera that involves karas and chatas. Okay, so that's what Rebbe does with the word aleha. So don't ask me why it says aleha. Why I don't marry your wife's sister, you know, and to take as a tzara, as a co-wife. Aleha. So we say it's very simple. The reason why it says aleha is to teach you what kind of avedas all of these people who bring a carbon, you know, who make a mistake. What kind of avedas we're talking about? Only avedas that involve a chatas and a karas. Says in Rabbanon who use aleha to tell you that the tzara is permitted to get married. If it's not a mitzvah, you're allowed to marry the co-wife. If from an era, if it's not a mitzvah of yibum, what do they do? How do they know all of these did it? What Rabban high swadim and all? How do they know all this? Nafkalu, they learn from another pasuk altogether. It says in the pasuk in the market, Rabbi Shua once taught his son, and he said in the following pasuk it says that Toida achas yelachem la'oisa b'shgaga. You have one rule for all those people who commit aveda b'shay. He talks about a carbon, and it says over there, this is true with avodah zarah, and it says over there that Toida achas. It sounds like all the Toida of the kabbanis. All the Toida compared to this particular carbon, avodah zarah, what it has to be shaygig and chatos and made koros. You have one rule for everybody who does something b'shaygig. And then it says v'hanefesh, and that person ashetasi b'yadrama will do it liberally. So we're comparing it, and it says there that person is a megadif and he gets karas. So we have two psukim, one pasuk that a text says about shegi, and then one pasuk talks about karas, and it starts with the pasuk v'im nefesh achas tachta b'shgaga. So we say what? As toida achas. Sorry, it says here toida achas yilachem ha'ezach b'nei toida achas yilachem. They all have the same rule. Is only shaking and you know karas and chatas. So too only applies these rules. Anything else that's a chatas and a karas. Ashkelon, all we know is Yochid v'Nasi Mashiach. So we know that an individual, whether it's Aved Gechadim, whether it's Shar Mitzvahs, and so on. However, but when it comes to a tzibur, where the carbon is totally different, how do we know that when the Bezdin made an error in law, we're only talking about an error in law which involves a chatas and a karas? So the pasuk ve'im nefesh. So the pasuk ve'im nefesh. We're going back to that pasuk before, and the nefesh, the yilmad, and the yilmad elya mitach. But instead, we learn the pasuk before from the pasuk later. The pasuk before talks about about tzibur. This pasuk in nefesh achas talks about the thing, but we already established that a nefesh achas is chatas and karas. So therefore, we'll say that the pasuk before we compare to the later one. We learned the Elya in the earlier pasuk, metachta from the later pasuk, to tell you that just like the later pasuk, individual is karas and chatas. So too by a tzibur is karas and chatas. So tzibur, okay, that's avodah zarah. But tzibur b'shar mitzvahs minol. What about tzibur? That pasuk is from avodah zarah. What about tzibur? All other avedas. How do you know also there's karas and it's chatas and karas? We had before. So Rebbe now that Rebbe learns all of this from Malel, what does he do with the fact that it says Toida achas yilachem? What's it trying to tell you? They all have the same laws regarding what? But Rebbe what's he doing? Boy, like the Tanya, he needs for the following. The fish and Matzina, we find by, let's say, in a dachas of an entire city worships avodah zarah, we find that different rules depending on the number of people. The fish and Matzina, we find Yechila kakasa ben Yechila and Marubim. There's a big difference if it's only an individual who another way zarah gets a very strict kind of death, but his money is safe. And the Marubim, but if the entire city commits avodah zarah, it's called an ir and a dachas. And there we said already, the people get only a lighter punishment, but they lose all their money. So there's a difference in the outcome, whether you're an individual or a community. Yechidim, b'skila, therefore, because it gets the harsh punishment, the money is safe. And Merubi, for the entire city does it, or the majority, B'sayiv, they get a lesser punishment, they get Sayiv, is Lefichim Moinov, they lose all their money. Yochel, I would have thought, Nachla B'Kabasein, I thought as well, that there should be a difference if the entire city commits Avodah Zarah, B'Shaygig, so maybe the carbon should be different than if only individuals make their B'Shaygig. Talmud Loime, therefore it says, Torah Achas Yilachem. Torah Achas is referring to nothing to do with the Bez making a mistake. It's referring to a city or an individual. If it's B'Shaygig, the punishments vary. But if it's B'Shaygig, they have the same punishment. Okay, so therefore he explains each one. So you tell me the only reason is because it says Torah Achas Yilachem. It seems from you, if it wouldn't have been for the fact that it's a Torah, I would have thought there's a different individual in an entire city when they do it by mistake. What carbon they bring? My license. What do you mean? What should you bring? A city that committed a sin. Individual. But you say if a city committed a sin, you would have thought that the laws are different. Bring a different kind of carbon. So let's understand. What kind of carbon would you have thought that they should bring? Should they bring a bull? And remember, a bull is only brought by a tzibur. Tzibur b'shar mitzvah the ma'aseh. It's only a tzibur who brings it by all of the mitzvahs, a par. So why would you think by Avodah Zarah a city should bring a par? It's something that only a tzibur, the Thai committed a sin. Kizba, you would have thought that instead of having a choice of a sheep or a goat, you could only bring a sheep. Yochid b'shar mitzvahs the ma'aseh. It's exactly what a yachid does in all the mitzvahs, brings that as well. Se'id, you wanted to bring a male goat. Is that what you think you should bring? That's what a nasi normally brings. Nasi b'shar mitzvahs the ma'aseh. Par la'oila zil chatzah. Maybe it should be two kabbanas, a bull for an oila and a goat for chatzah. Tzibah v'chom the ma'aseh. That's what a tzibah does by Avodah Zarah. So what would you have? A tzibah means the entire Klal Yisrael, not just one city. Velamai se'ida, that you would have thought not a sheep but bring a female goat. Well, every yachid, that's what they bring. They have a choice: a female sheep or a female goat. So what would you have thought? What would you have for you telling me that we would have thought we need to achas because we would have thought that if a city commits Avodah Zarah, the carbon is very different. What should the carbon have been? And every carbon we brought down here, the precedent regarding other mitzvahs, now Avodah Zarah is either relegated to a tzibur Klal Yisrael, where no one's a bezin, the Klal Yisrael, the Aaron law, or whether Kei Mashiach or Nasi. And if it's just a sheep or a goat or a sheep, that's what a yachid brings anyway. Itzich, we need it. I would have thought. I would have thought that the tzibur pays themselves on an error law from the bezin, right? It's called a par helam dovish tzibur. They bring two kabbanas. They bring a par for an oil and a goat for chatus when it comes to, let's say, Avodah Zarah, if that's what they paskened, and so maybe they should bring something similar, but the opposite. Maybe they should bring the par for the chatas and the soya for the oila because they're a small tzibur, a mini tzibur, and Avodah Zarah. So we would have thought it has to be something much more mammoth than just an individual carbon. But what should it be? It has to be different. It's not like a bezin. So we make it the same carbon as the bezin, but the opposite. Or you're right. We need another carbon. The ain loyd takana, but we don't know what it is, so you can't fix it up. That's what we'd have thought. Therefore, you need a pasuk. Okay, now we're going to start learn a little Gemara here, which is hopefully, even though Rashi goes to town over here, hopefully we can sort it out. Levi said to Rebbe, we had this a few times in Shas, where Rebbe, for some reason or another, really gives Levi a hard time. He uses some harsh words, and here we use a harsh word, but we had in other Gemaras where he actually goes through it and shows him how he was wrong. But here, Levi said to Rebbe, my idiot turns says, well, why in the world does the Mishnah say there are only 15 cases? Listen to Zayin, there are actually 16 cases, as we'll soon see. Omalei, Rebbe said, Kimedumali, it seems to me, he says to his Talmud Levi, She'ein loy moyach bekotkotka. He doesn't have a brain in his skull. Wow. Tough words. Now, what did Levi want to add that Rebbe says you're so wrong and you're not thinking things through properly? My darkach, what do you want to say? You want to say a possibility, let's say that it turns out to be your sister-in-law is your mother, that your brother married your mother, and how can your brother marry your mother? Because we know that the brother's not allowed to marry Ashes of, even if it's not his mother, not allowed to marry the father's wife. But we had an opinion of Yehuda that says that if it's the anusa of your father, Rabbi Yehuda argues that he holds the anusa. If your father forced himself on somebody, then that person, then your brother is allowed to marry her. So there's another case here where if your brother married your mother, who was a victim of your father, that there is no din of ibn. So my data, what case do you want to add? Imay anusas aviv, Imay that was raped by your father, and then she married your brother, and but died childless, and now it's ready. You're the brother-in-law, and tell you that you're potter. Imay anusas aviv pluktet abirabani. That is an argument of your Rabbanan. Because remember, Rabbanan hold when the Torah says you shouldn't marry Ashes of the wife of your father, that includes also a woman that your father forced himself upon. Our Mishnah does not want to get involved in machlekes. That's what Rebbe said to Levi. So what kind of silly question are you asking in the first place? Says the Gemara. Now the Gemara is going to go through a few cases that we're talking about. Our Mishnah does talk through machlekes, as we'll soon see. So what's Rebbe attacking Levi for? For Levi, no. By the Easter mitzvah, we have, for example, the Easter of a mitzvah. For example, you're not allowed to marry your grandmother, which is only Easter of mitzvah. That's called shnius, a second generation, and so that's called Easter mitzvah. What do you call it? The Easter kedusha. So Easter mitzvah is called shnius, like a secondary. It's only midrabanan. And Isa Kedusha is, for example, not a relative. Let's say she's a mamzeres. Your brother married a mamzeres. You're not allowed to marry her, but it's called an Isa Kedusha. And that your brother should have married her. That's only Chai V'Lav and not Chai V'Krisis. So there's a machlekes. The machlekes is whether, of course, you cannot marry your brother-in-law. You cannot marry her, but should you give her chalitza or not? Why? Maybe you should get chalitza because the Easter is only a lav, it's not chorus, and therefore the mitzvah asay of yibum should push away loisa. Till now we had a discussion that asay does not push away loisa l'shes chorus, no zarayis, but mamzeres is only a lav. Maybe the asay of yibum should push away the lav of what do you call of mamzeres. And in fact, the only reason why he doesn't, the reason why he doesn't is because gzeira bi shnia utter bi rishayna, which means. Okay, when they get married, the first time they get together, that is a mitzvah in the Torah, and the asay push away the lois. Once they live once together, there's no mitzvah to continue living together. So the next time there's no mitzvah, and you can tell them only have one relation with her, and that's it, not further. We're worried zayda bia shnia utter bia rishayna. So the asay does push away lois. So even though we don't want them to get married, but nevertheless, a chalitza is involved. So that's isa kedusha. So there's Easter of Loye Kaddish, Easter of Kedusha, Easter of Mitzvah, and so the Chacham hold you need Chalitza, and Rabbi Akiva disagrees. He holds a Chayavi Lavin, also you don't need again. He holds a Chayavi Lavin, Chayavi Krisis. In fact, he holds if you marry somebody that's alive, the children might be a mamzer. Not like we learned that the mamzer only is produced from if you live with somebody that is forbidden. If you commit the sin, you get chorus. Is therefore it's an argument of Akiva Chachamim. And Rabbi Akiva holds that even though it's only a mamzeres a lab, still not only you're not allowed to marry her, there's no mitzvah chalitza either, and it's mentioned. But the Isa mitzvah, the Isa kedusha, we're going to learn later on. The pligi Rabbi Akiva rabbanon uktoni, yet it's mentioned in the next parak that included. So what do you tell me? But I mention machlekes, and we do mention in the Mishnah machlekes. So we answer on behalf of Rebbe, bepirkin kambrin. Hear this. What Rebbe meant was that in our Pedic, we don't want to get involved with machlekes, and that's in the next Pedic. So therefore, he attacked Levi for asking a question, which now seems to be a very valid question, and it needs an answer. And the answer would be, look, in our Pedic, we don't want to get involved with machlekes. And yet he ziddled it out. He completely cursed him out and said, you don't have a brain in your head. So obviously there's a history there. And this is part of, he was trying to train him. And we'll see in another Gemara, what's going on here. Anyway, saying about it further, what means no machlekes? Well, our whole Mishnah says that not only you're not allowed to marry the woman, the erva, nor can you marry the co-wife. The whole idea of tzoros is an innovation of Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai, for the very few instances of Beis Shammai, is mekel. We're going to learn later of your Gimel, a very interesting thing about this relationship with Beis Shammai regarding Yevamos. So Beis Shammai is matet tzoros to the brother. Beis Hillel oisin, and it's a machlekes. Our Mishnah mentions it, and this is the saddest thing the Gemara says here. Beis Shammai b'mokem Beis Hillel ain't a Mishnah. It doesn't even register as an opinion. I mean, just imagine if you were Beis Shammai and you're told that your opinion doesn't even register as an opinion. Everyone else's opinion, a dissenting view is a dissenting view, but we don't want to get involved in machlekes. But Beis Shammai's view ain't a Mishnah. I mean, it's just, imagine if you were Beis Shammai. Definitely you have a complex. Says the Gemara. Okay, I'll get another question. What about Eichet Achi the plea of Shalabana? What about Eichet Achi that was not in the world at the time where Rab Shimon says that if the child was born, Rab Shimon said that we learned in the Mishnah, the last case in the Mishnah was an Eichet Achi that's to say Reuben was married to this woman, and then Reuben died, and Shimon wasn't born yet. Then Shimon was born. And Shimon was born after Reuben died. Shimon is considered is this woman is Asa to Shimon because he wasn't around when she died. That's called an Eishes of Shalaya B'Lame, and that's Asa. And Shimon holds that if he was born after, if Reuben, let's say, died, and this woman now married Shimon, and meanwhile this Levi was born in between that period, so he's born after Reuben died, but before Shimon married, and then Shimon married this woman. According to Rab Shimon, if Shimon dies, Levi can marry her. Why? Because now that it became Shimon's wife, she's now totally Shimon's wife. Now Mola Reuven, and therefore he's no longer an age of Shalai, and he's allowed to marry her. So that's what Rab Shimon says. So the pligi Rab Shimon Rabban is an argument. Rab Shimon Rabban, and Rab Shimon holds you need chalitza, and yet it's mentioned on Mishnah Uktani. Says the Gemara, Rab Shimon. We're going to learn like the version that says there's two possible cases according to Rab Shimon. In one case he agrees with the Chachamim, in one case he doesn't. When does Rab Shimon argue with the Chachamim? If Levi was born after Shimon married this woman. If Levi was born after Shimon married this woman, so when Levi was born, whose wife is she now? We don't look at the original. And we learned yesterday that once Shimon marries, it becomes Shimon's wife totally. He learns completely in every respect. So if Shimon dies and Levi was born before Shimon died, whose wife is Shimon? Shimon's wife this woman is Shimon's wife. It doesn't matter that once upon a time was Reuben's wife. Right now, when Levi was born, it was Shimon's wife completely. And therefore, Levi is a brother, and you have to have chalitza from him. So, and that's what Rab Shimon argues with a Chachamim. But Rab Shimon will be made if Levi was born before Shimon married Reuben's wife. Reuben died. Levi was born. So at this stage, this woman is Asatid. And then she marries Shimon. Once the Isser is on the woman, even though she marries Shimon, the Isser remains with him. So if later on Shimon dies, even though Levi was born before Shimon married Reuben's wife, it doesn't help anymore. Once the Isser is tagged onto her, then Levi cannot marry. So since in the case they're not arguing, our Mishnah is talking about that case where they all agree. So again, there's no arguments in our Mishnah. Says the Gemara, you're telling me there's no arguments on Mishnah, but Rabbi Ishia said, Rab Shimon understood. Rab Shimon argues in all cases. He argues even if a lady was born before Shimon married her, he argues doesn't matter since Shimon married her afterwards is now totally Shimon's wife, and the Isa disappears. It's a new woman. Isa disappears, and therefore Levi has the mitzvah of a brother-in-law, and so therefore we see there's an argument here. Our Mishnah mentions it, and we follow the Rabbanon. Said that doesn't disturb us. Rabbi is completely repudiated. It doesn't matter. Says the Gemara. Okay, now. You see this long Rashi, don't get so daunted. But Rabbi Yehuda says name Rav. So too Rabbi his uncle said, there's a Mishnah later on that says that you have two sisters. You can have, remember we learned that Mishnah before. You have two sisters. That Reuben married one sister and Shimon married another sister. And then when they died, there's Levi there and Yehuda. When these two women die, neither Levi nor Yehuda can marry either of these two women. Why not? Because each one is the sister of your zakuk. You're not allowed to marry the sister of your wife. These are not 100% your wife yet, but the moment Reuben and Shimon died, they became attached. The zakuk attached to Levi and Yehuda. So, and each one's a sister of the one that's attached to you. So therefore, each one of them, whichever one you choose, is the achos. You have the achos zukasa. So therefore, we don't want you to marry them. On the other hand, the fact is, it's not a sister of your zakuk. It's not just of your wife. So therefore, a chalitza you're required. So the Mishnah says over there's cases where you have two sisters, that attached to that next to the brothers. But if each of these sisters is an usher to one of these new brothers, then it's as if she doesn't exist. So you're allowed to marry, and you have to marry, or you give chalitza to the other woman. So, for example, if your mother-in-law, so there's Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. Levi's mother-in-law married Reuben. Yehuda's mother-in-law married Shimon. and Reuben and Shimon they both had co-wives, and Reuben and Shimon died. So Levi now cannot, for example, in Reuben's wife, Reuben's wife is usher to Levi. So all he has left is the other sister, the one who's married to Shimon. Let's just forget about the co-wives. So Reuben and Shimon married two sisters. These two sisters, one was a mother-in-law of Levi. Reuben's wife was a mother-in-law of Levi, and Shimon's wife was a mother-in-law of Yehuda. So now you have a problem of achos kukasi. But they both died. Levi cannot marry Reuben's wife because his mother-in-law. So the only woman that's available for him is Shimon's wife, and therefore there's no problem. He can marry her or chalitza. Same thing with Yehuda. Yehuda cannot live with Shimon's wife, so all he has left is a remaining sister, which is Reuben's wife. There's no achos kukasi. So the Mishnah says over there that in all the cases you can figure out a case where that one of them two sisters, and yet they can marry Levi and Yehuda because one of them is asa to one of the sisters is asa to Levi. Therefore, Levi can marry the other one, and one that is asa to Yehuda, Yehuda can marry the other one. Okay. The achos was again the and all them, and but I can say that one of them is asa to this brother, but mutter to another brother, and mutter to him, and another one is asa to the other brother, mutter, and other sisters mutter. And therefore the remaining sister, we're talking about two sisters. Reuben and Shimon married two sisters, and the remaining two sisters, and the remaining sister, one of them is asa to Levi, but there are other sisters permitted. You can do a full yibum or chulitza. That's what they said. Comes along Rabbi Yehuda Metargim. He says that this is only possible. It's only possible from chamoisa, from mother-in-law and onwards. Those cases of the Mishnah. She said, when it talks about daughters, for example, granddaughters, and so on. Loi cannot be. My time, why? How can it be two sisters married to Reuben and Shimon if they happen to be the daughters of Levi and Yehuda? How can Levi and Yehuda bear each one a daughter that's a sister of each other? The only way is that they marry the same woman. But how can Levi marry? How can Yehuda marry the wife of the one who's married to Levi? It's impossible because you're not allowed to marry your brother's wife. Only when there's a mitzvah yibum. If they had a daughter, there's no mitzvah yibum. So therefore, it can only be possible if it was a woman that was forced. Levi forced himself on a woman, so therefore, and had a daughter, and then Yehuda forced himself on the woman and had a daughter, and therefore these two daughters are sisters of each other. These two daughters are sisters of each other, and what do you call it? And they happen. One is a daughter of Levi, one is a daughter of Yehuda. Now, if they marry, if they then end up marrying Reuben and Shimon, they end up marrying Reuben and Shimon. Is what do you call it? So if they marry Reuben and Shimon, and then Reuben and Shimon die, they both cannot. Neither of them can be married to Levi or to Yehuda.